Hey, Tony, welcome to the show, my friend. It's been a long time coming. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited. I'm a fan. I will admit to having not listened to everything of Marvel Plus because I'll admit to being a little behind on Marvel Plus.
There's a
But
lot.
what I hear, I love, and I obviously your appearance on the best new show of 2021, Geek, was outstanding. I love that show so much. I feel like what Paul does on that show, I got to know you. Listening to your show, you're real and open, honest guy. So like when you listen to your show and the BS show, you're like, you get who you are. But like
Mhm.
what Paul does, because I was a guest too, you're like, wait, I don't even remember how he asked me that question because he cuts himself out. So it's such
Yeah.
a smart show, and I loved your appearance on there. So I'm excited. I'm so thrilled you asked to have me on, and obviously you had Dave on and a few other folks. So this is so cool.
Yeah, I got to know you in the same way through the Geek Show. That's just such a great show just for finding people to connect with because like every person he has on, you can really get to know a little bit about them and be like, hey, I think I would really vibe with this person. I think they'd be a
Right.
good person to have a conversation with.
Right. And even if it's just not on the show, just to be like, I want to be friends with that person. Like there's a few people who he's had on that I've not met yet. So you were
Mhm.
one, and there's one more. I'm like, okay, gotta make sure I get to know
Yeah.
those people, invite them on, or you invited me on. So obviously at the end of this, when we're done, I'll talk about you coming on Indie Comic Spotlight and see if you're keen on doing that someday. That'll be fun too. So this is exciting. Yeah, Paul's the best, right? What a great show.
Yeah, I thought it was just such a brilliant idea especially the way, like you said, he cuts himself out of it. It's like, I love that. It just seems like it's kind of like those documentaries like you'd watch like Behind the Music or something like that, where you don't hear the interviewer's question, you just hear someone telling a story. I love that.
Yeah, he's a genius. It's such a great show. So I'm excited. And if you guys aren't listening to Geek on the Fantastic Universes podcast feed, what are you doing? You're missing out.
Definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So I've been listening to you on a variety of shows
Yeah.
because you're kind of like me. You got a lot of plates spinning, right? You're like you do all these different podcasts in addition to your actual like real life job. So tell me about how you kind of got into like podcasting. How did that even happen? Is this a new development?
Yeah. Well, so actually, it's funny. This will come out, I'm assuming tomorrow or the next day, right? Because you're trying to get them out a quick turnaround. So this is the
Yep.
beginning of December, and on December 30th will be my 100th Indie Comic Spotlight episode.
Oh, wow.
So what happened was, which is very cool. So I was a fan of Chris and Dave. I actually found them on Podbean because I'm old. And while yes, I have an app on my phone, I actually like to download my podcast and listen to them offline, like on my old school MP3 player. I know you've got a
Yeah.
video feed, so everybody can see I'm an old man. So I would I would listen to that. I would listen to so Podbean actually made them. I don't know, maybe when it was episode, I don't know, 30 or 40. It could have been a little bit later, but it wasn't much later. Halfway through their first year, I'd say, I saw them on Podbean. Like they were like, hey, you might be interested in this because you're listening to all this other dorky stuff. So I immediately was hooked from them. I went back to the beginning. I've listened to every single episode of Comics in Motion with Chris and Dave. And so because they're such affable, fun guys, I was never really super big on Twitter. I'm not a social media guy. So I got on and I sent them a message and I was like, you guys should do Speed Racer, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And I love Speed Racer, the comic book, the cartoon from when I was a kid. So like, okay. So they did it and they shit all over it. Like they shit on it hard, which is fine. I mean, I love Speed Racer, but I get where they were coming from. So I wrote them back. It's like totally fair. So then so we just started, through Twitter writing back and forth. And I was writing for DC Comics News. I started writing for them back in 2016, doing reviews and stuff. Always been a comic nerd. So because I had my foot in the door, they reached out and were like, hey, do you want to come on and do something just because you're a fan? And then so I did Tank Girl with them. So one of the first episodes of the VHS Strikes Back / Comics in Motion crossover was Tank Girl, and which again they hated, which is totally fine. Apparently I love to make Chris hate things. And then they invited me and Max on to do the Crisis on Infinite or CW crossover because Max works for the sister site of DCN for Dark Knight News. So we were on. That's actually how I met Max. Even though we wrote for the same guy, we didn't know each other. So it was just cool. So then maybe like a little while after that, Dave, so it was like towards the end of 2019, 2019, Dave was like, hey, we're thinking about expanding and having a daily show, but we don't want to do it all. So what do you say? So it's like, I'd love to do something about indie comics because that's always been my jam. So he's like, cool. So I like created just a trailer of what I thought the show would be. And as soon as I sent it to Dave, he's like, yep, this is the show. You're going to go do it. So they came on. My first episode was I Killed Giants, which was a crossover with them. And we did the movie. And then every either Thursday or Friday since then, I've been on. I've never missed a week. I have stuck some of the their shows on the Season's Greetings with Jack. I've stuck some of those on my day, but for the most part, I've just been going nonstop since then. So that's how it started. And then because Chris and Dave are such great guys, they're like, what, so you've got an idea, they're going to foster it. They're going to be like, yeah, that's cool. So that's how it started. And just I apparently can't seem to stop myself.
So it started. No, it's fine. So it started with Indie Comic Spotlight. That was the first.
That was my first the show that I did myself. Correct. Yeah, but it was just listening to Comics in Motion that started it. I mean, I've been listening to podcasts for years. Like, I know everybody's favorite is Joe Rogan Experience. I don't listen to that. I mean, I understand. For me, it was Mark Maron, who I think actually started, like Mark Maron, the comedian. What the fuck with Mark Maron? I always liked him as a stand-up from way back. I've always loved him, and so I've been in like. He kind of, to my mind, he invented what we're doing. The fact that we're doing this is because he and Adam Carolla were like, they didn't know what else to do. They're like, let's try this thing. And so they both did it independently of each other. So I think like all of us podcasters who owe a debt of gratitude to Adam Carolla and Mark Maron. And so I love What the Fuck. I still think that's like, it's like, he's like a therapist. Like, I don't know if you listen to that show, but the stuff he gets out of his guests. So I was listening to shows. And then once I realized, like, I listened to NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour show, and I just kept digging. And so, the further you go down a rabbit hole, that's where the algorithm is cool, because it's like, you might be interested in. So it's like, so start looking for comic book stuff. So Podbean, it all comes down to thanking Podbean for giving me a recommendation that you're a dork. Here's some dorks from England. They sound like your people.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. I think, so then you hit a point, I guess, eventually where you're like, I think I could do this. Like this, not just famous people. You see someone like Chris and Dave who are just regular guys. Yeah. And it's like, oh, this is just two guys talking about, movies or comic books or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And they make it seem like, they make it seem like it's easy to do as long as you're confident enough. And then I was on Mike's show, Genuine Chit Chat, talking about teaching, and Mike even's like, you should do this, because it just, I'm actually an introvert. I'm like, it's weird. I work with folks as a teacher, and I'm an introvert, and you are driving alone all day in your truck, and you're much more of an extrovert. So it's really funny that we've chosen professions that are the opposite of who we are. But the nice thing about doing the podcast is, introverts still have things to say. We still want to talk. It's just then when we're done talking, we need to go like decompress for 2 hours. So the podcasting is a really great place to do that. Just hearing Chris and Dave and their banter, they're so fun. They're like my favorite duo. I love listening to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, if it wasn't for their show, I wouldn't have found you. I wouldn't have found so many other people that I've ended up having on this podcast.
Awesome. Yeah.
Debt of gratitude to those guys because they just have some awesome.
Yeah, we call them the Podfathers in our network. That's what we call them on our. Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. So I think of all your kind of different podcasts, artistic endeavors you got going on. My favorite is Indie Comic Spotlight. I love that you put this focus on it. Indie comics, and I feel like in the past 20 years have gotten more and more and more mainstream. Like they're not the big two, but people have seen like the value in stuff that's not DC or Marvel. And there's been a lot of fantastic stuff that has been written that is not published by the big two. And I love that you put a spotlight on it, right? That's of all the things you do, that's my favorite show to listen to. And it's gotten me to, go, hey, I think I want to actually read this thing that I've heard about, but I've never actually dug into. Like right now, my next plan after I get done with this Hawkeye series is to go read that 100 Bullets that you guys.
Oh my God, dude, you are going to be. And it's a very, as I said on the show, it's a very uniquely American show. So you'll relate to it, especially because I know you're more of a local, you drive locally more now, but you've been out there. You've seen America.
Yep.
Like, so you'll get what this book is saying. It is so good. I can't wait for you to read it, and then we'll talk about it. And because we only did the first half, so when we do the second half,
Yeah.
we have you on as in the third chair, maybe to talk to us. It's a mind blower. It's amazing.
So we're from like the same neck of the woods too, right? You are originally from Michigan.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And
I'm from Southwest Michigan. Yeah.
Or should I say the state up north? Because I'm down here in Columbus, Ohio. We're like old time rivals forever, indefinitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, but right now you're not living in Michigan.
No, I live in Florida now. Yeah. So my wife is also from Michigan, and we raised our families there. We're divorced. We're married to each other. We were previously divorced. We didn't have any kids together. We blended our families.
Yep.
And so then when the kids were old enough and moving out into the world, my wife hates the cold. She hates the cold. And Michigan, and because Ohio's the same way, it is sunny 100 days of the year, maybe.
Uh-huh.
And Florida, where I live now, is sunny about 320 days a year. And so she just needed that sun and the warmth. She hated the cold. And so the opportunity came. She got a library job. And because I work online, I'm a college professor for Siena Heights University in Adrian, Michigan. We have faculty members, full-time faculty members who live all around the country, like one in North Carolina, one in Indiana, one in Nebraska. But then we have adjuncts who live everywhere, like Montana and Vermont and wherever. So it's like, because we are a truly remote university, we've been doing it for a long time, it was easy to do. So when my wife got offered the job, I called my boss. I was like, hey, she's like, are you going to come to this meeting and this meeting and this meeting when I need you to? Yep. I was just up there 2 weeks ago. So she's like, as long as you come when I need you to come, you can live anywhere you want. So that's the deal. So I still work in Michigan, and I was just there in the middle of a snowstorm in the middle of November. That was nonsense. But yeah, so it's cool. So I'm down here now, and it's Florida. Florida's not really my scene. Everything in Florida is trying to kill me. There's alligators outside, and I'm terrified of them. But my wife loves it, and our backyard is a river, and it's beautiful, and the sun sets over the river every day. So you can't beat it.
Yeah,
if we weren't recording this is what I'm going to tell you. It's December 3rd, and you can shit on me and hate me later, everyone who's listening, and you. If we weren't recording this, I'd be at the pool, an outdoor pool.
Yeah, I can't say I'm thrilled to know that. No, actually, it's actually like seasonably warm up here right now. Like yesterday,
you're in shirt sleeves.
Yeah, it was like 60 something degrees yesterday. Today it's I think maybe 50. So it's not bad
when
at
I
all.
was there in November, it was snowing and 28. So what are you going to do? It's the thing about Florida is the weather is equally as volatile, but just not with cold. It's like it could be thunderstorming, like blowing sideways, like in your window is bad. And then 10 minutes later, the sun is out and it's humid. So it's the same temperamental weather that the East Coast of the United States has, so. Yeah.
You got to take the good with the bad. Either way you go. So
for sure.
All right. So this Hawkeye series. First of all, I want to ask you all the series overall so far. What do you think about this whole idea that Disney had, that Marvel had to, incorporate series that would connect to the MCU? Like, it's a pretty crazy idea. What do you think about how it's working so far?
Well, to be fair, and I will admit to having not finished them all, I have not. But I feel I'm of two minds. I feel like as storytellers, I love it because it fits into what comic books are. It fits into the greater world. I just read a book, and this was a Pop Gorilla, one of the other shows I do, where I just reviewed this book called All of the Marvels, where there's this guy, David Walk. He read 27,000 Marvel comics. Yeah, you're making a face. That's the right face. So from 1961 to 2017, he read every single Marvel comic that was published. And then he tried to put that into some sort of narrative story arc. It was an amazing book. It's totally worth a read. I don't know if you listen to audiobooks when you're driving. I listen to the audio. It's totally worth it.
Yeah.
You should get, it's amazing. So, but the reason I bring that up is because what he mentions in there is how more so than any other thing, and why I kind of like indie comics, is that the indie comic universe is its own universe. Like if you're going to read 100 Bullets, which was a Vertigo title, DC owns it. But DC also owns Dark Horse. It's not like the 100 Bullets and Hellboy are going to, they may do a crossover, but it's not, they don't really live in the same universe. So I like that the indie comics universe, there's a little less to understand. And what David Walk did with all the Marvels is he said, well, really, truly, Marvel's been telling one story since 1961, and it takes place in air quotes 14 years in this sliding scale. So he tried to navigate that. So what I love about, the reason I go down that rabbit hole is because what I love about the series is that they're doing that. They're acknowledging that not everything is in New York. Not everything is just the Battle of New York. Sometimes Wanda's over here doing, and that's how comic books work. As comic book readers, we know, and I know you're a big X-Men fan, and the X-Men, for the most part, and I think it's always been okay. People are like, I wish the X-Men were in the Marvel Cinematic Universe instead of with Sony, but the X-Men have always been separate. Sure, Wolverine will show up in, Civil War, and, there's some of the big crossover events, and there's been some Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch have been both X-Men and Avengers, but the X-Men have been their own universe, really, always. And so what I love about the Marvel Cinematic, or this TV version, is it's leaning into that. It's like the Marvel universe is vast, and sometimes shit's happening somewhere else, and it's not just the movie. So I love that part. The cynical part of me is like cash grab. It's like, how can we make sure that everybody is subscribing to Disney Plus forever? And when they launched Disney Plus, a lot of these shows are supposed to come out, and then pandemic happened and whatever. So when they launched Disney Plus that first year, none of this stuff was on there. So it's like people paid for the full year of Disney Plus, didn't get any of this content. Now you're like, well, fuck, now I got to keep paying for it. So I see. So that's the cynical part of me, where Disney is Darth Vader. And it's funny that they bought Star Wars because they are the evil empire. However, I think as the comic nerd in me loves this idea that Hawkeye is a small story. The comic on which it's based is a small story. This is a small story. Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's a small story. I mean, yes, it has ripple effects for the big thing, but it's a small buddy cop story. Loki's different, and that I haven't watched yet. But you get the idea. And Scarlet, I loved the WandaVision. Man, I loved that. I thought that was exceptional. Of course, anything Catherine Hahn is in is going to be good.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's a queen, right? We're watching the Shrink Next Door right now on Apple Plus. She's just the third billing at that. She's not even in every episode. But when she's on screen, you're like, Paul Rudd and Will Ferrell, they might as well not even be on there. If Catherine Hahn's on screen, you can't look right, but she's just outstanding. So I loved WandaVision, and I heard she's getting her own spin-off series, which I'm excited about because she's her, give her whatever she wants. So I love that. The comic book nerd in me loves me, but the cynic in me is like, so how do you feel about the fact that it is, your show is this one of your many shows, all of your plates that you're spinning, the Marvel Plus show is leaning into that.
Yeah.
Is that why you did the show? You're just like, well, I'm going to watch them all anyway. I might as well just own it. It's like, how do you feel? Do you feel like there's any cynicism there? You're like, really, I got to watch a show about fucking Squirrel Girl? Now, I love Squirrel Girl, so if they do a Squirrel Girl show, I will watch that. But I'm just saying, like, is that how you feel, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I guess listen, maybe I'm a little bit like Disney, and so you can be of two minds about me. So one, I'm just a huge fan, and then maybe I'm just capitalizing on everyone's interest in Disney and Marvel, right?
Maybe, yeah.
But yeah, I'm of the same mind about it. It really bugs me how big of a corporation this is, and that they're swallowing everything up. It's like, but I can't stop watching what they're putting out, and it's like you feel like this pull, like I shouldn't be watching this, but I can't stop watching this. Like, but yeah, it's like I'm going to be watching this and obsessing over it anyway. Why not do it and like put it out there as entertainment and meet new people in the process? Like, this is fun. I've met so many people that have become friends just through doing this, by having new people on the show all the time and like new perspectives. I've had people on here that like don't even like Marvel, like that come on as guests, and they're like, yeah, I didn't really, this episode was all right, but overall I kind of hate what Marvel does, and like, all kinds of different people. And I've made so many friends that it's like, I don't know, I think that's my favorite part of it, is the meeting new people and growing not only is the listenership growing, but like my circle of friends is growing, and it's going like worldwide, right? I have all these friends in the UK now. Like, what is that? Like,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
so cool, isn't it? I know. I feel the same way about the Comics Push family, and which then it's like you, Scott Weatherly, Spider Dan, Angry Andy, like all these people. Like the rings go out because you're like, oh, and then
yeah,
like Julian Darius, because he's friends with Scott, has been on a few times, and Julian's one of the greatest human beings ever. And he and I are gonna super go meta in the new year, and we're gonna actually do, because we're both teachers, and like we like writing and literature and stuff. So he's got a French degree and I'm an English degree, but he teaches English too. So we're gonna actually do William Blake's he did the Songs of Innocence and Experience way back, way back, hundreds of years ago. He actually did etchings for each poem. So it was like, we're calling that the original indie comic, like this list of poems that the poet actually made artwork for. So we're going to get like 8 people are going to listen to that show. I know nobody's like, I'm not listening. That's not really, but we're going to do it. And I would never have met Julian or even had anybody who'd be willing to be like, yeah, William Blake, that was technically a comic book. Let's do it. So it'll be, yeah, I agree. It's so fun. So, and again, I mean, I love what you're doing with the show, because I think like here, 20 minutes in, we haven't even talked about the show yet. And that's part of why I love listening to your show, because it's like, these are just nerds nerding out at its finest. And that's a beautiful thing about what Marvel Plus, what your show gives us, and what Marvel is doing is just like giving us nerds. One of our daughters called yesterday because he won't listen, I don't think, to this. Travis isn't listening, but she wants to give him, they live in Ohio, and she's going to get him tickets to the con in Cleveland for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
So she's like, she's never done that before. So she's like, I need an expert. So she called me and she's like, what do I do? I'm like, here's how you do it. And here's what you do. Get the 3-day pass, blah, blah, blah. And so like, that's super cool. She's never gone, and he's a big gamer and anime fan. So it's like, and she's like, but he's really introverted. He's like you. And I'm like, I know, but that's okay. Like, cons are full of people who are also like big nerds who just want to like, they're not interested in bumping into you. I said, there's going to be somebody there with a $400 homemade cosplay of Kate Bishop. She doesn't want to bump into you either. She doesn't want to ruin all her work she did. So trust me, it'll be okay. So she was nervous because, that's the thing about us nerds is it's just such a lovely, respectful, they're the nicest people in the world. And so I think, you have to be to say, I'm going to suspend disbelief for a while, and I'm going to believe that, and going back to me, I'm old. So when I was a kid, Superman, I was 5 years old when that came out. It's like, you can believe that a man can fly. And Christopher Reeve is always going to be my Superman. Superman 77 is a top 5 superhero film of all time for me. When you look back at it, you're like, oof, those effects were bad. But like, it gave us nerds voice for the first time. Like, that was a moment for us. So yeah, I love it. I hear that. Thank you for making that a positive, friend, because it can just be easy to be stuck into the evil empire of Disney.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that what you were talking about, how you're just being passionate about doing something and how you plan to do something that'll probably only get eight listeners. I totally get that. Like, Dave and I even have, we kind of have a little secret.
I can't wait. Really?
Project. Yeah, we have a little secret project that I can't talk too much about. And it's this thing we keep talking about. We never actually get to, but, it's really niche. I mean, like, super niche. I don't think most people are going to be into it, but Dave and I love the subject matter so much that it's like, we want to do this, even if no one listened,
Yeah, just for fun. Yeah. I mean, and who knows? I mean, maybe with Julian and I doing the William Blake episode, people who don't normally listen to comic book podcasts, who are English nerds, would be like, William Blake. Yeah. I'll click on that, and maybe we'll get a whole new. Because I still think, high art, low art. I hate that phraseology. I mean, come on. Listen. Maybe it was like 3 years ago when Jim Lee was doing the covers for the Suicide Squad during Rebirth. There was this cover of Suicide Squad that gives me goosebumps. I'm going to get all freaked out just thinking about it. It's Katana, and she's holding her sword in front of her eyes, and Killer Croc is in the blade. It is like, it should hang on the wall of a museum. It is like beautiful. It tells you everything you need to know about her. In that, you see she's fearless. There's a monster in her blade, which means she's looking at a monster, and the look on her face is totally calm. It's such an excellent work of art. And if it weren't a comic book cover, people would be like, oh my God, look at this picture of this epic, warrior princess that Katana is. but because it was like, it's just some comic book thing. But I'm sorry, Jim Lee is a king, and he deserves to be on the wall of the MoMA or whatever, wherever modern art is housed. And I think of that all the time. So, the hope with that show is when we do the William Blake show is that's what we're going to talk a lot about is how, visual storytelling. It's all high art. I'm excited. So I'm adoring.
No, that's a really cool. I agree 100%. Like it's somehow become these two different categories when it's all just art, and it always has been. It's just like one was at one point aimed towards a younger audience, but it's like there's been art, forever aimed at younger audience. There's pictures that are made for kids throughout history, and they don't quantify that differently. They're not like, oh, well, this is for grown-ups and this is only for kids, and this artist isn't a real artist. You know what I mean? It's like it's the same thing with the judgment on these popcorn action flick Marvel Comics movies, or a Martin Scorsese film. It's like some people will say like, well, these are completely different things. One is real movie making, and the other is a kid. It's for kids. It's popcorn flick. It's action flick. It's a money maker. But it's when I look at it, I just look at like these are movies that are both telling stories, and they're telling damn good stories. And it doesn't matter who if it's PG-13 or rated R, they're still telling fantastic stories. That's what attracts me to the MCU. It's not even the action. It's not all that stuff that that when people from the outside look at it and go, oh, it's another one of those. When I look at it, I'm really invested in the storytelling. Like that's my favorite part about it. The interactions, the dialogue, the stories that they're telling. Right? I'll be honest, the action and stuff is like second tier to me. Like that's not my first focus when I'm getting in. That's why I like these series so much. They're really like character driven stories.
Yeah. So, and that's my favorite stuff. I mean, that's why when you say who's your favorite blah, like my favorite X-Men, Kurt. I believe yours is Kitty Pryde.
Wolverine.
Okay. I don't know why I thought is Kitty on your top. I swear you've mentioned Kitty and stuff.
I've talked about her recently, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So maybe it was just recently you did. I mean, but Kurt is my favorite. Nightcrawler is my favorite X-Men, hands down, because he's such a complicated character. Because when you think about if Kurt didn't look like a blue demon, he'd be a priest.
Yeah.
And that's such an interesting setup for a character, somebody who's born who looks like a demon, but who still believes in like Jesus Christ as his personal savior. And he believes it so much that he would be leading the congregation if he didn't look like he looked. And if they let him looking like he looked, he still would. And I was raised Catholic and I'm not on that team anymore, but I feel like that is such an interesting look at Kurt. We know so much about him in like such a few things. So to me, that's why right, you're right. It's like you and the characters that you don't care about, and the ones that don't work are the ones that are like samey, just giant gray blobs or whatever. The reason the Snyder cut was so much better than the other cut is because it spent the time on the characters. Like me as a comic fan, I know everything about Vic. Titans were one of my favorite stories. So I filled in the blanks when I watched the original Justice League. Mm-hmm. For people who didn't know who Cyborg was, outside of the guy who says "Booyah" on that cartoon, they didn't get it. And then they're like, "Oh shit!" So, yeah, I think it is. I love character-driven fiction anyway, and that's you're absolutely right. Comic books, these stories, the reason people love the MCU, the original 20 Infinity Saga, is because those actors made those characters feel like they're friends.
Yeah.
And I think the casting of Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop is brilliant because she's such a great actor, and you feel like she knew who Kate Bishop was before she stepped on set.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the segue. We do need to get into the episode. As you said, we're like what, like 30 minutes into this show, and we haven't to it. No, hey, that's what I do here. I love it. I love this. So, as you said, Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, fantastic, right? Like it. I feel like, and I was going to ask you, have you read the source material that this is pretty strongly based on?
Yeah, I did. So my daughter, my youngest daughter, read this in real time. She was picking it up from the shop, and it was actually tough because as you got like past the first year, the that's why you see after so many episodes, Ahad isn't doing all of the art because they couldn't
Mhm.
keep up and they were running behind, and that was getting people pretty pissy because this. Imagine reading this in real time and then having to wait.
Yeah.
Instead of 1 month, now you're waiting 3 months or something. So my youngest was reading this in real time, so I could just read over her shoulder. So
Mhm.
I did reread the first 12 in preparation for our show. I didn't go back and reread the whole thing because again, I didn't want to get further ahead because the back end, the last 10 are quite different. I don't know if I think the show will go that way anyway. And if even if it did, I didn't want to think too much about that. I just wanted to focus on that intro. And in the comic, of course, Kate and Clint already know each other.
Yeah.
They don't here, but yeah, I've read the source material. I love when Pizza Dog showed up in the show. I was shocked. I was like, oh, they're going to get a one-eyed dog. I don't know if that's just CGI'd onto that dog. It doesn't matter. It's so cool. Um, yeah, I'm a big fan, and I know from your last episode you started reading it. So, what do
Yeah.
you think now that you've read it?
Um, I'm in love with it.
So good.
I think I'm on the fifth issue. I'm just kind of like reading it in between like the kids' sporting events and like stuff like that. We're like taking them to taekwondo and stuff, and I'm like reading you know what I mean, a couple pages
Yeah,
here and there. And I was just blown away at how much they're adapting it. Like it's clearly there's a different setup, right? Like you said, they're not in the show. They're just meeting for the first time, whereas in the comic they've already known each other. Um, they switch like I think in the comic, Pizza Dog belonged to Hawkeye. He saved Pizza Dog, not her. And in the show, she saved the dog, and that became her pet. So I think that's purposeful. I think that kind of like switching them is purposeful because she is meant to be the Hawkeye at some point going forward.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think they're really going to lean into that. So like I think that's why they gave her some of that stuff that was originally Clint's part of the story, to make it more solidified that like she's gonna be the new Hawkeye.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at how much of the stuff they're putting in the series, like exact dialogue coming straight from the book. I've seen literal panels play out on the screen. Like it's crazy. And it's the closest, I think I said in the last episode, this is the closest I've seen them adapt something. Like usually they change a lot around about a story. But this feels very much like the comic that I'm reading.
And I think it's because it's that street level stuff. When you think about season 3 of Daredevil, which is based on Born Again, it's obviously
Mhm.
slightly different because they weren't going to, they didn't do to Karen in the movie in the show that Frank Miller did to Karen in the comic. Thankfully, actually, I always thought Karen was kind of done dirty in the comic, but I mean, Born Again is Frank Miller's best work, in my opinion. It's not my favorite, but it's his best work. And you can see how closely they tried, but they're like, well, we have to make these changes for this
Right.
reason. And again, same thing. That's the next closest thing I can think of is season 3 of Daredevil, maybe. And obviously the problem is that in this, they've given Clint a family where, he and in the
Yeah.
series, he and Bobby, actually Bobby brings him his divorce papers at one point later in the series. Bobby, the Mockingbird. Sorry. Adrian Palacki played her in the MCU, right? On the Shield show. But so they've changed her up a little bit. So those are things you have to do just for whatever reason to fit into the narrative of the MCU. But like as far as plot goes, the tracksuit bros, oh my God, those guys. That is like they rip them right off the page and they're like, these are the most absurd villains. And I think the reason it works with Daredevil and Hawkeye and why you can get away with it is because they're such street level, claustrophobic stories. You only need 10 characters to tell the story, so you can be more true to it. You don't have to bring in Iron Man. You don't have to bring in Hulk. It doesn't matter. It's just these two people in this neighborhood. And that's, I think that's why it's easier to stay true to it.
Yeah. I think this of all these series so far, this is one of my favorites. And we're only halfway through now. They could totally screw it up, but
Can't imagine they're gonna.
I don't think so. There's something about the flavor of this series that like it just feels like this is a good one. You know what I mean? Like from the word go, it felt just good, man. Like the other ones, I think maybe too with the problems with production and stuff. A lot of the other series may have suffered from that. Like, they were missing an episode of What If. They cut a whole piece of the storyline out of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They did all these things because of COVID came along and kind of messed up filming and production and post production, like all this stuff. And maybe Hawkeye wasn't affected as much. Maybe they got to tell it the way that they meant to. But man, if it plays out like the comic is playing out and it continues with those beats, like what they're doing so well in this series is blending like the comedy with the action with the heart. It has a lot of heart, this thing does, like especially in this episode. This might have been one of my favorite episodes of all of these series so far, just because it had like a little bit of everything. And yeah,
I can agree with that. Yeah, I think there's maybe maybe the episode of WandaVision when they brought back the Quicksilver, like that was like when the reveal was he was an actor, like that was brilliant. I thought that was super smart. But no, I think you're right. I think because even that you were working towards something else, where this is just like this is them being the characters that they're going to be. This is them becoming friends. This is him getting a new daughter. This is her getting a new dad. It's smart because in the comics, in the world, it's Kate's dad who's alive and her mom who's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really smart that for this they flip that. Not only because Vera Farmiga is awesome, but it's also because you're like she needs a dad.
Yeah.
So it works really well. And Jeremy still remembers the snap when he didn't have a family for those 5 years. So that version of Clint. So I like it. I like that change, and I just think it's you're right. It's their chemistry is astronomical. You see how in character they are, and how Jeremy's not done this for years, and he just drops back in like nothing happened. So you see what kind of good actor he is. She was off doing Dickinson, which is a show I love too, when she got the offer for this role. So she's playing Emily Dickinson and Kate Bishop. It's like these are like huge things she's taking on her shoulder, and what a swing to go from one to the other too. So that says something about her skill. I think that's part of it, is that your leads are A-list, award-winning style of actors. That helps, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, and I feel like this role too, depending on who you got to fill it, it could have been really not good. Like if you got the wrong person to play her, she might just come off as like kind of a bitch. Like, it's like she's not gonna be, but the way she's so charming, like she's so like she could be just the way that she's like, so overconfident and like, but she's always messing things up. She could be annoying. She's not annoying at all. Like she is so charming in the series. And then Hawkeye's like, or Jeremy Renner's kind of understated, like the way that he acts about things. And like, he's just like, kind of burdened by everything. Like, I love it.
Wants
dude.
to go home, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a very, I know, I don't know if you've made the comparison, but some people have made the comparison to Lethal Weapon. But honestly, I know this is like quite a stretch, but he's another comic book thing. I make the stretch to like Dante in Clerks. He's like, I wasn't even supposed to be here today. Like that's what he's doing the whole thing. He's like, God damn it. I just wanted to take the kids, see the tree and see the play and go home and make gingerbread house. And I can't. So that's how I feel. Like he's playing it in that I wasn't even supposed to be here today. Not I'm too old for this shit. That's what I love about it. Is he's not that he's put out. I mean, because in Clerks, Dante shows up and does the work. He doesn't want to, but he does. And Clint doesn't want to do this. And I think it comes through in his performance so well. And I was like, and like that scene when she, in this episode where she falls through the skylight and all that, or was that at the end of the last episode? That's in this one.
It was at the end of the last, but they replay it like right at the beginning.
Right. So that look on his face is just like, and you're right. It can easily be annoyed, but he isn't. He's just like frustrated. He's like, of course, this is what happened. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, and I love it. I love that his whole goal is like get back to his family, and it, you feel it happening slowly. Like she's becoming part of his family. It's going to be like, oh, she's family too. Like this is important. But I love the side of Hawkeye that is like, yeah, he's almost annoyed to be having to do this, but at the same time, he's choosing to do this. Like that's the hero that he is. He is choosing. Like she calls attention to it later in this episode, and it's like, oh, when she does, it's like That's it, man. When she's like, "No, you are a hero. You're choosing to be here for a stranger when you could be home with your family. You chose just because a stranger might get hurt. You decided to stick around." It's like, no, you are somebody's role model. You are a hero. You know. I love
I
that. I
agree.
love that.
I agree. I think it's really well. I think it's really well played because I think there's a lot like in the second episode where he's like, "No, that's Katniss Everdeen," and
Yeah.
there's actually that reminds me like when Jon Stewart was still hosting the Daily Show, he made a joke about Hawkeye being Katniss Everdeen, like that. So that joke's been around for years. So I think they're like calling back to that. So I think this is fans have been mad that Hawkeye's been sidelined for most of the Avengers for the Infinity Saga. He's been Ronin, he's been, mind manipulated. Other than it's Jeremy Renner, he's not been Clint. He's not had a chance to do anything. So
Yeah.
I think this show is being very meta and saying like, we see you fans, we hear you, Hawkeye's fans, people like me and Spider Dan who read West Coast Avengers in the 80s, when we're like, we want our Hawkeye. And in this, she draws the picture of Hawkeye and that,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's his West Coast Avengers costume. And he's like, I'm not gonna wear that. But I think that's so smart. So it's like, I think when you put those two things together, that is a love letter to the fans who are Hawkeye comic fans, but also like people who like the Jeremy Renner Hawkeye get plenty. But this is, and sometimes you say fan service is bad. I don't. In this case, I think fan service was great. I thought it did what we needed. It does what we needed to do for comic book fans and the movie fans, and those of like us who like both.
Yeah, I think all these series actually have done a lot of that meta stuff where they're talking directly to fans. And you can tell, like, when it comes to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was all about not only showing the world that, hey, this is going to be your new Captain America, but it was also telling the fans, like, hey, Steve Rogers is gone. It's time to move on. This is your new Captain America. And it was like telling that story. And I think they did it really well in a way that, like, by the end of it was like when he first gave him the shield, I was like, okay. I mean, whatever. But by the end of that series, I was fully on board with the new Captain America. So it accomplished its goal.
It did. And fans, people who've read the comic, have seen Sam in that costume. Like, that wasn't a shock for anybody who's read any Captain America comics. You've seen Bucky as Captain too. So I get what the show was doing. It was like comic nerds, which way is it going? But we all knew it was going to, we all know. We all get it. We all know who can carry a movie. It's not Sebastian Stan. Like the way that, not that he's not a good actor, because he is, but they didn't create Bucky in the MCU to have any charm.
Yeah.
Nobody wants grumpy old man Captain America. Everybody loves Sam. He's everybody's favorite. You know what I mean? Like, he's so like as the sidekicks from all of the main series, like, everybody loves Sam. I love Sam. I love Sam in the comic. I think Anthony Mackie's a great actor. So to me, it wasn't a shock that he was going to be captain, because they're like, I've already seen that picture, and it makes perfect sense with what they were doing. So I agree. I think, but again, it was just enough. If you had never read the comic, you could get invested. And if you've read the comic, you're like, oh, which way are they going to go? Because I know one of them is going to be, or like me, you're like, of course it could be Sam. And and if it had been Bucky, I'd have been like, well, it was also Bucky. I'm okay. But so it's like in your mind, you're like, of course it's Sam. That's what it has to be, like mentally, not knowing anything about the actors' contracts or anything. I don't look into any of that. But just like, to me, my heart said Sam. Just like in this, like you've been saying all along, and Dave mentioned this too. This is Jeremy Renner's going to be top billing. This is Kate Bishop's story.
Yeah.
This is her coming out party, as it were. And like when it's all done, because in the comic, they call each other Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And I suspect that's how this will end, right?
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if he's done it already. No, I've seen it in the book, right? He calls her Hawkeye. She calls him Hawkeye. But if you remember in Avengers Endgame, that first scene, that opening scene where his family gets snapped, he calls his daughter Hawkeye. And I think that got a lot of people like speculating that, like, oh, they're going to switch it and they're going to make her like the Kate Bishop character, because he literally was like, nice shot, Hawkeye. And it was like very, very much from this comic book series. But yeah, I can't wait for that. I can't wait till he calls her Hawkeye. That's going to be fantastic.
That's how it's going to end, right? Of course. It better.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into this, because the whole like prologue of this episode is us getting to know Maya Lopez. And I thought this was really cool that not only that they put her in this series, because at first I was questioning it, like, why are they putting her in this series? It felt like it was coming out of nowhere. But that's because these are like two different stories. Like, what they've done here is they've combined the Hawkeye series with this Echo story that happened like in the Daredevil comics. So it's like, but it's so brilliant that they brought them together because they have so much to do with like American Sign Language and being hearing impaired, and this whole idea of like, how do you live in a world where you can't understand everything, or like, you only get every other word, and like, it's difficult. It's difficult for you to like something to overcome like this. And the comic did it in such a good way too, where they lean really hard into that. Like, only this is from Hawkeye's perspective. He could only understand like every third word, or he had to learn to use sign language. And I think there was a whole book later on in the series that was like mostly sign language, right? It was silent. And this episode was very much like that. They were playing on that, like playing with the audio, like, okay, it's really muted here. And they did it with both characters. And I love that. So using that, the hearing impairment, as a way to make these stories come together as one story, it's such a brilliant idea. Like, I see it now, like, oh, that's why they're using her. That's why this works. Like, so what did you think about this whole little origin story for Maya Lopez?
Yeah, I love it. I think Echo is one of those anti-hero type characters from the comics that most people have never heard of, which is good. I think it's smart. It's, you've already, you turned all your B-listers into A-listers.
Yep.
With the MCU, well, now you got to get your C-listers and turn them into A-listers. And Echo, and the thing is a well-developed comic book character isn't a B-lister or a D-lister. It's just you've never heard of her, right? Yeah. You, not you, Brett, but like you, the general public. So I love that this was her origin story. I love that they do lots of shortcutting. The fact that she is deaf is important. That's what she is, a Daredevil hero villain, because Daredevil's blind, and it's a cool, obviously that's a thing that you do. You give somebody the opposite of you and you see how you can work. I think, and it's, again, that was fan service because Wilson Fisk adopts her in the series. So of course you're like, this whole thing, there's somebody above. Nerds are like, it's got to be fucking Kingpin. And if it's not him, it's okay too. It was just cool that you eventually it will happen, right? You're telling us, even if at the end of this 6 issues, Vincent D'Onofrio is back as the Kingpin. That's okay, because we know he exists now. When you bring in Echo, so it does 2 things. Is it plays on like everything you said about Clint coming to terms with his own disability, and us seeing Echo always being deaf, and how she's overcome her disability in that scene with her as a little kid when she knows all the answers even though she can't hear.
Yes.
So smart. It's just there. It's there if you want to see it. If you don't get what's going on, that's okay. But for us, it's like, oh yeah. You see how smart she is. She's better than everybody in every room she's in, and her deafness hasn't held her back. So I love that. And the comparison for Clint to understand how his hearing disability doesn't have to be one. And his son in episode 2 is trying to sign with him, but he won't do it. And it's like his son is trying harder than him. So there's just lots of really nice touches there. And I think so giving us Echo gives us access to the Daredevil lore, but it also gives us somebody who is I suspect there will be a totally silent, or it's like in this one, it's definitely muted, and when Kate's talking and Clint can't hear her, and there's some good stuff there. But I still think I wouldn't be surprised if episode 4 or 5 is going to have no sound for most of it, and it won't even have music. It'll just be a silent episode. They're setting us up for something visually and auditorily stunning. So I love her as a villain. You're right, she's out of place. But again, this is going back to what we said off the top. This is how you're saying it's a Marvel universe. We're done. There's no Sony, there's no Netflix, there's no anything. We have it all now.
Yep.
It all exists. And you want people, that was the biggest knock on the Daredevil universe. They just kept talking about the battle for New York.
Right.
And other than like, I think in the newspaper where Kieran works, like there were a couple of, headlines on the wall. That was it. So now you're like, oh, we're done with that. This is we're all in the shared universe. So I think it's great. And if you don't know who she is, she's a cool, badass villain. She's frightening. She's so terrifying. the actor's face. What do you make of the actor? I think she's so good. Because I think being
Yeah.
scary isn't being not scary, but being intimidating is a hard acting job. She's great. I'm
Yeah.
scared of her.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just starting as like the little girl who is like learning these things. She's learning martial arts, and she's
With only one
obviously,
leg, too.
yeah, yeah. And that was something I was like, was that I don't know about the character of Echo. Was that another part of the story, or is
I
this
don't think so.
this
That
is
does
something
not
that
ring
they
a bell.
had?
Dave will tell me that I'm wrong.
That's one more thing that they're adding, like, into, well, I don't know if they're adding it, but that's one more thing that this person has to overcome, right? And she obviously she's overcome her being hearing impaired, and she's a badass fighter with one leg. It's
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter. She can overcome anything, and I guess her kind of skill set is being able to learn things, much like to mimic people, and like being able to watch things and pick up on it and learn it like that just by seeing it. So I think that's pretty cool. Like it's much like Daredevil, where he has this incredible other senses because he has no sight. Everything else is like enhanced. And for her, it's like her sight is teaching her everything just by watching. I think that would be brilliant, though, if they did a silent episode. I don't know if they'll do it because I don't know how many people would be like bought into that, but I would love it. I think it would be incredible. I think that would shoot this series to the top for me if they did something that artistic, like we're going to do an entire silent episode, much like an entire silent issue. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
I think it would be smart. I just did some quick look. It looks like that's her. That's the actor
Okay.
who just has
That's what I was wondering.
They wrote it in. Yeah, it looks like it.
That's what I was wondering, is that the actress, is that a disability that she lives with? And that's another kind of neat thing that, maybe that helps her be so good at playing someone who is hearing impaired. Is like, oh, I've lived with this thing my whole life.
Mhm.
So imagine if I lived with this other thing my whole life and had to adapt. I love the line from her dad about living in two worlds, like jumping between two worlds. And I like that works perfectly too with any kind of like struggle in life like that. It's something that's lifelong, where like, okay, you've got to live this life, but you've also got to intermingle with these people who are, don't deal with the same things as you. So yeah, really good. And I think you're right. She is intimidating, and that is hard to do. That's really hard.
I think
Especially
that's
in
why D'Onofrio has to show up, because, well, I love Michael
Yeah.
Clark Duncan because he's such an imposing man. Gone too soon, Michael Clark Duncan. But the reason I love D'Onofrio as Kingpin, while Michael Clark Duncan fit what he looks like, because D'Onofrio has got that thing, or that dead
Yeah.
look in his eyes, where he's just
Yep.
fucking fright. Like, he's terrifying. Without, I mean, he's a big guy. D'Onofrio's big, but he's not like that imposing. Like,
Right.
So I love that. She has that too. You know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
like that. It's a good connection there. And again, that's why I think D'Onofrio's performance as Kingpin is so good, is because that dead look in his eyes, where he's like, I don't care. I don't care whatever you're saying. It's irrelevant to me. I'm on a mission. And she has that in this. And so it is. And I don't know if she studied that. It looks like this is her first acting role, which is outrageous to me, that this is how she's bursting onto the scene and introducing badass McGee. She's great. And I feel like it is a great channel of that character. And even again, if we don't see Kingpin, but we see her, it's good enough. I'm thrilled. I think she's so good.
What did you think of that little scene we got, though, where she was doing martial arts and you got the guy, her uncle, come up and you only see him from the back and he like pinches her cheek and laughs? Kind of sounded like D'Onofrio there.
I think it is. Oh, I totally think it is.
Yeah. I wonder if they actually do, though. I wonder if they reveal it by the end. I would hate, though, if they tried to make it like, oh, that wasn't him. Like it was someone else.
If you don't reveal it, that's okay. If you just hold on to it until the end of the stinger at the end of Spider-Man, I'm still convinced too that what's going to happen is that Kate Bishop will show up in the Ms. Marvel series, which, by the way, also, when you do that, sign me up. because my other daughter,
Okay.
one of my other daughters, was reading that in real time, the G. Willow Wilson,
Yeah.
Kamala Khan series, which might have been, I mean, the best Marvel. If this Hawkeye series didn't exist, I would say that G. Willow Wilson, Ms. Marvel, was the best Marvel series of the tens. And
Okay.
I don't know if you read it. It is.
Oh, no. I've heard good things though. It's like,
Oh my God. So I think that Kate will show up in that because I think they're building the Young Avengers, right? And then in Ant-Man and the Wasp, his daughter. So you're building the Young Avengers with these girls. Young Whip, because I mean Kamala is actually a girl, and obviously Kate's a woman. But and they're aging up the actress for the new Ant-Man. They switched out actresses, right? So you're going to have, you know, the Young Avengers is there. So I'm just saying, I suspect that will happen. So even if you wait and you have Echo be the villain in the Young Avengers series, and that's when you know, it's like you just keep teasing it. I'll go along for the ride. You don't have to reveal it, but like I'd rather that you don't reveal it. That I'm with you than say, oh, it wasn't him all along. That would piss me off.
Yeah, I'd be fine with waiting 6 months or something to see that Kingpin is in this world and that was him. But yeah, if they're like they re-show that scene and then they pull back a little further and it's not him at all, I'd be like, why would you do that? This is a Quicksilver moment all over again. Like
I love that. I kind of love that though.
It was
yeah, but you don't want to go back to that well too many times.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed kind of getting the backstory on her. And then we jump right back into where we left off last week, which is, well, we didn't know it, but they're in a warehouse, but we get to see in this one, it's a KB Toys, which I thought was really
nice touch for Gen Xers who know what that is.
Yeah, I was like, I bet most like younger people watching this today have no idea that reference at all. You know, they don't get that at all. But it's like, when I was a kid, there was KB toy stores in like all the shopping malls, and like, well, that's another relic of the past, right? Shopping malls. It's like those are barely a thing anymore. But yeah, I love that touch that they were in a giant KB Toys. That was fantastic.
Oh, I agree. I thought it was really cool, and it's, again, to me, it's playing on the age discrepancy between them. You know, it's like in the comics they're not nearly as far apart age-wise, and obviously as they are with the actors, and so they are leaning into that here, and I think that's part of it. It's like this is he's a relic of a past time. Hawkeye is too. So I think that's my feeling, is it's meta commentary, because you could have done anything. You didn't even have to have the name on the warehouse, but that's a choice that they made. Yeah. Loved it. And then the action in this, I know you said earlier, it's not even about the action, but this episode is essentially all action.
Yeah, but it's
the stunt choreography is out of control.
You know, that's something I thought actually, I don't know if you watched Loki, but that's something I thought suffered a little bit in Loki, was the fight choreography. I think I called attention to it at some point, but I was like, you know, compared to some of the other stuff I've seen with like action scenes, fight scenes and stuff like that, it looked choreographed. You know what I mean? It looked
like season 1 of Iron Fist.
Yeah.
You can tell they didn't have a lot of time to shoot season 1 of Iron Fist, and it comes through. Everybody craps on the performances in that, but they literally had a week to prepare for that show. You know, it was like too quick of a turnaround. So I feel okay. So I haven't watched Loki yet, so I'll look for that when I watch it, because I'll be like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
Just in comparison, because they had some good sequences in that, like action sequences, but I just felt like the fighting didn't quite do it. But this series is fantastic. I love the fight choreography. I love all the action sequences, the driving. Like, this is insane. They clearly had a budget for this thing. This whole episode, like I said, it's my favorite, man, so far. It's like all action, but somehow they worked in some heart. There's jokes sprinkled throughout the entire thing. It felt like the comic book. I think it was just issue 3 of the comic book was basically this episode. It's got the car chase scene.
Same
it's got
car, except he refuses to take the car. Yeah.
Yeah, I love little touches like that are like, for people who have read the comic, like, oh, there's the car, there's a 72 Challenger, and then it's like, oh no, they're gonna take the ugly car,
the beater.
Yeah. I love that. I love that they do that kind of thing, just to like be like, nope, gotcha. But the trick arrows, the whole episode about the trick arrows. Like the comic was the same way. That car chase scene was like, oh, trick arrows. Which one does this? What does this one do? And the whole, well, let's back up a little bit. So they're in the warehouse, and before they escape, we get her, and you're saying she's so intimidating. Like she's, interrogating them without any words. It's pretty awesome. And we get to realize too that this guy who I thought was just a member of the Tracksuit Mafia is actually somebody a little more important, right? He's got some pull here and some connections to this mysterious uncle, this higher ups, because he has the ability to tell her like, hey, stop doing this. And she actually listens to him. So we get to see that he's not just another Tracksuit Mafia guy. He's not just another bro. He's just like,
oh, bro, that's so good.
He's someone more important, right?
Yeah.
But Hawkeye loses his hearing aid. She crushes it, and they make this pretty awesome escape. And when they get outside, they get in the car. And wait, do you remember the guy's name? The guy that I just said was a little more important than just a tracksuit guy. What is his name again? Do you remember?
Have to look. I'll look while we're talking. I don't remember. Okay. No, because again, it's like just the three of them are all that matter to this. It's Echo and Kate, and they don't call her Echo in this, but the show is called Echo.
Yeah, and I just in my head, he's like he's just the stunt double for Jon Snow. Like that's who they have playing this guy. Because I was like, wait a minute, is that? No, they wouldn't do that. But they make this awesome escape. And like I said, the banter throughout the whole thing, like it's stuff straight out of the book. He's like saying that she's 9 years old and spoiled rotten. Like these are direct.
Look at her, she's 9. Yeah.
Yeah. Tries to convince them that, look, dude, she's not the Ronin, but he still won't admit that he is Ronin. And I'm guessing that's just mainly to protect his family more than anything. I don't think it's about protecting himself so much. I think it's more about like, why I can't have my family be connected with this, this vengeful, terrible, vengeful person. But, and I guess I skipped over it, but we saw that Ronin is responsible for her father's death. That's her whole vendetta here. And so you kind of get why she is so dead set on taking Ronin out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I think. I hear that, and that's all true. And I think that's a really cool way to do it. And it's a lot of visual shorthand, and it's redoing. They do this really well in these shows where they reshoot scenes from things you've seen previously, where they mix the previously shot footage with new footage and they merge it together. They do it as editors for the win. Good job, editors. You do a great job making it seem like it's the same shot when it clearly isn't. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that part of it. And of course, what we also see is the commentary that, because we have this family drama. Clint has his family drama. Kate has her family drama. Echo has her family drama. And nobody wants to see what's right in front of them. We don't want to see that Eleanor is evil. But Kate is so dead set that Jack is bad. And in the comic, Jack is in it. He's the swordsman, whatever. And I'm with Dave. I think that's a dodge. I think we're setting up that one step, which is fine. I mean, he's still who he is. He's still the swordsman, but I still think he's not a baddie. I think it's going to be like the Mandarin thing.
I could be wrong. Completely. Yeah, I agree.
You're wrong, and I'm okay being wrong. But I like that there's this commentary on family throughout this, because again, all of the Avengers are about found family and Kate finding a new dad, and Hawkeye getting another daughter, and Echo finding an uncle, and then her adopted dad, Wilson Fisk. But like her dad was bad. I mean, Ronin, you say what you want about Ronin as a serial killer, which he totally was. Yeah. But he was one of those serial killers who kills bad guys.
Yeah. He was a Dexter. Yeah.
Yeah, Ronin doesn't show up at your place if you're selling Girl Scout cookies.
Right.
At all.
Yeah. I think that was a cool revelation too, because they played this really sweet scene between her and her dad in the beginning, And then when you realize like, oh, well, if the Ronin killed him, he was a bad guy. And then you realize that it's like, oh, he was in this whole crime syndicate thing. Like, it's not a great, she didn't come up in the most wholesome of households. Like, you know, she was surrounded by organized crime. This is crazy. So you get that she's kind of been sucked up in all this. And like, maybe, and that's how they're going to turn it. Like, she's not so bad. She just
Like Electra.
doesn't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
The car chase sequence.
Oh my God, dude. Bro.
So incredible. Yeah, bro. Oh, and let's not forget Trust the Bro Moving Company.
So good.
I love it, man. They such attention to detail. Like, well, let's make it a Trust the Bro. Yeah, I love it. So the whole sequence though is badass. Like, I love when that they play this throughout the whole episode where when Kate and Clint are talking and she says something, but he doesn't hear any of it and ends up repeating the exact same thing back to her. I love that. It's no better than like later when they're on the subway and, you know,
we should let the dog out.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And in the meantime, though, he like, you can see that her heart just swells because he says like, you know, you're not wrong about that one of the greatest archers in the world thing. You know, and it's just like, oh, like her idol just told her that she's on his level. Like, that's crazy. But yeah, the trick arrows was so good. Like, that's something that I thought would like, and it was silly. Let's be honest. It was equally awesome and silly, right? That the arrows were so ridiculous, like the putty arrow and the acid arrow, and that, you know, all these different arrows that are straight ripped from a comic book. Otherwise, you would never see it in something live action if it wasn't ripped from a comic book. And they could have made it really stupid, but it was so entertaining to watch these different arrows.
Well, and I think it, again, leans into what he is. It leans into what Hawkeye is. And it's also the knock on, you know, the Green Arrow with the, you know, Green Arrow of the 70s where he'd like shoot his arrow with like a boxing glove on it. And so Hawkeye was never that guy. But now they're like, oh, no, Hawkeye can be that guy too. So I think that you're commenting on his counterpart in the DC universe. You're commenting on he has no powers. He's just full of tricks. So, and like you said, it gives her, plus one of the arrows is a Pym arrow, right? It says Pym on one of the arrows. So you're acknowledging Hank is out there somewhere doing shit, and Hawkeye, you know, Jeremy's still in, you know, Clint is still in touch with him. So I think that was really smart to show the Pym Industries there, or, you know, whoever it is, if it's you know, the Wasp, whatever. So I think that's really smart. And but yeah, I think it was a really, again, the fight choreography, it felt like one take, which of course it wasn't. I think, again, editors for the win. When you're doing a fight, I love Christopher Nolan movies. I'm not here to shit on Christopher Nolan, but he cuts away from action all the time, and it's so infuriating. And that has been the one thing about the Marvel movies and the Marvel shows, is they don't cut away from the action. They either have good stunt performers or they ask the actors to do some stunts themselves. So we get to see a stunt. We get to see it. If Christopher Nolan shot the elevator scene in Winter Soldier, we wouldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Right. And I love Christopher Nolan. I'm not here to bury Christopher Nolan, but I'm saying, give me a scene. Give it to me. If you're going to do this crazy, outlandish thing, show it. And so, you know, half of The Dark Knight, you don't know what the fuck is happening. And you should see that. You should see Batman kicking ass. The reason people love the scene in Batman vs. Superman when Ben Affleck comes in and he takes out all the guys in the, you know, when he saves Martha, it's because you see it.
Yeah, it looks like a continuous shot. I love that.
And that's what this whole bridge scene feels like, one shot. And I don't even understand how the editors did it. It's so good. I love it. And because this whole series is taking place in 4 days, it feels that way. They look worse each episode. The makeup artists are making them feel bad. By the end of this episode, they look awful. I can't wait to what they're going to look like by episode 6. They're just going to look terrible. And I think it's so smart. It's so good. It feels lived in. It feels real. For an over-the-top absurd, here's a bunch of trick arrows show, it feels completely real. It feels like, yes, this is as street level as we can get.
Yeah, it's super grounded. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's so silly, but somehow they're like, okay, that's believable. Like, I know that a plunger arrow held them onto a moving train. Like, yeah, okay. But I'm like, but when she goes, oh, that's what it's for, and you're like, oh, that does make sense. Like,
what a joke. What a setup.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that Pym arrow too. Like when you saw that it said Pym, I knew exactly what it was about to do. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a giant arrow. This is so awesome. I love that they threw that in there.
Yeah,
What a cool way to
smart.
connect.
Really
Too.
smart. Yeah. Again, rewarding the fans, but also just making it look cool as fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
love it. Um, okay, so where are we at now? After that, they're on the train together. Like I said, that heartwarming moment when he kind of admits that she's a great archer, and it's clear that he isn't hearing a damn thing this entire time. He hasn't been hearing anything because they keep repeating the same thing back and forth, and it gets no better than when they're back at the apartment. And I'm not sure if I'm skipping over like anything, but I'm pretty sure that
No,
they're on the
I don't think
back to
so.
the
Yeah.
apartment. Yeah, they decide that they should break into the place, and that's basically it. They're like, oh, we should go break into my mom's security place and find out about all these people.
Right.
She's
That's
a
after
really
he gets the hearing aid
bad-
back.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, because
So
that's how it ends. Because they go back to her place and he doesn't have the hearing aid and his son calls.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he goes back. He doesn't have the hearing aid, and this whole scene where she's relaying to him what his son is saying on the phone, like, dude, it's so good. Like that's what I meant about like this, like the heart that they put into this episode. It's got everything. It's got like the crazy action sequences, awesome fight choreography, um, cool stuff that ties it to the MCU, like the Pym arrow, and God, like Maya's backstory, and then this sequence where he can't hear his son and she's relaying every word to him, and you can see it. Renner kills it. Renner kills
So
the
good,
emotion.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like you believe this guy's talking to his son. It's so good. Um, but yeah, that was like when it got to that point of the episode, I said, that's it. That's it. This is very likely the best going to be the best series because this
Yeah.
is so damn good. It's got everything so far.
Yeah, because what happens next is really just the cold open of the next episode. And they've done that. They've done that every episode. It's like, wait, did she fall through at the beginning or the end? You're like, oh, no. And you forget. And so
Yeah.
then the last 5 minutes of this episode, to me, that's the end of the episode, is the moment she gets him his new hearing aid. But before that, and that can just be the end when they're sitting there at breakfast and she's talking and he's deliberately not listening and he turns his hearing aid back on, which is a callback to episode 1. So to me, that's the end of the episode. It's like it ends lovely. They're having breakfast. Everything is good. Then those 5 minutes at the end when they break into the place, it's a cliffhanger. So that is to me the cold open for the next episode. So I think that is what I think makes this excellent storytelling is you give us this emotional beat, but you also know we can't end on that. We can't end on Hawkeye being sad or whatever. So we're going to make it crack a joke, then we're going to give you action, then we're going to stop. So those last 5 minutes of the episode tell us nothing because we don't know it. It doesn't mean anything until the next episode. And so I think it's really well done. It's well paced. So this one was like 40 minutes and the one before was like 51 because they're saying, well, we're going to tell our story. This happened to be a 39-minute episode or whatever. We're going to spend these last 5 minutes setting up the next episode. So I think it's really well written. And I think that's what you mean about it feeling so grounded because it's like, it is like, and it feels like a comic book because it's episodic. What's going to happen next month, Spider fans? Don't forget to tune in, or on the old Batman show. So it's the same thing. I love the setup that we're going to break into my mom's house. We're going to do these things, but we're not going to find out anything. And you're looking at it. You're watching the show. You're like, we're not getting a reveal in this episode. There's only 5 minutes left. And you're okay with that because you're not going to get any answers. They're not trying to give you any answers. They're just trying to get you as close to your screen as you could get for the ending. And what did you make of that last scene? The very last second. Yeah.
Yeah, when they get caught breaking in. And he stays in the shadows a bit. I'm guessing that's supposed to be Jack, right? That's Jack.
You would assume.
Yeah. But you can't quite see his face, and it seems like there's a reason that they did that. And I don't know why. I don't know why they would hide the fact that it's him if it's him. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like,
what if it's
wait a minute. Is it? Yeah, like this might be someone else. Why else would they hide his face? But you saw the Ronin sword, so that leads you to believe it should be Jack, but who knows? Who knows? I love though that, like you were saying, each episode is jumping right back into the action where you left off. I feel like all of these series have done a pretty good job at that. Of like, that's how they keep the story small and contained. Is like this is happening, but like right after one another and in a short period of time. But no more so than this Hawkeye series. You said it's only 4 days, so it's like even more so. This is such a small story in comparison to everything else we get, and like, you know, the MCU. It's so big. It's so like these cosmic stories. You know, how much time was used in telling the Infinity War and Endgame series? You know, like a 5+ year span with the time jump. This is literally a couple days, and it feels like it.
Yeah.
It feels like the way they end it and then start it right back up exactly where they left off. I love that. It really feels like you're in there with them. It's like, and you know it's going to pick up in the exact same place next week. You're not going to be like, oh, 1 week later. You know, it's so edge of your seat like the whole way through.
Yeah,
and I love
that's the callback. That's what I said. This is the callback to comic books. This is how comic books are. And it's also part of the comic book timeline. It's like, well, if you take 6 months to tell 3 days of storytelling in comic books, 6 months in real life have passed. So then when that arc is over, do you skip 6 months in the comics, or is it just the next day? Which is why the entire Marvel comic book universe has only been 14 years, and why Bruce Wayne is still 35. Although that doesn't work, because that still doesn't work for me, because Damian has been Robin for 20 years and he's still 14. He's aged 2 years and 20. So Bruce has to have. I struggle with that, because how quickly was Jason Todd Robin before he died? So I have problems with that timeline. Yeah. But at least in the Marvel timeline, the book I read, it's all about Franklin. Franklin is your marker. That's how you know how long things have happened, because of Franklin. And so I think that's cool. Really, yeah. I never really thought about, because I like Fantastic Four fine, but I never really thought about Franklin as the time marker for the MCU. But he used him because he's the first child, right? Franklin Richards is the first child of the MCU. So it's an interesting way to look at time.
Yeah, I just heard that for the first time. I don't know, like maybe 2 weeks ago. Like this idea that, because I always knew that, like, well, a month passes, a month doesn't really pass in between.
It can't, yeah.
Right, especially if you're continuing with the same story. It's like, and the MCU has been this way too. It's like, it might be 3 years later, but it's not 3 years later. It's been a month since Civil War. You know what I mean? But I was listening to an X-Men podcast, X-Men Unraveled, and her whole show is she is telling the story of X-Men chronologically. So
nice.
It's like sliding scale of like time, and she called it what she call it? The Marvel Time Wagon.
They call it. That's a great name. He just calls it the sliding scale is what he calls it. But yeah, I like the Marvel Time Wagon.
14 years. I had never heard it put into exact numbers, like 14 years though. Like that kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh, this is somehow much cooler now.
Because they have to keep that in mind. They have to keep all those things. And you should read the book. When you read the book, I don't want to. It's so good. It's fucking amazing. All the Marvels it's called. But anyway, I think so. I love what they're doing here, because they're acknowledging, they took 3 months to film this series, whatever it took. But because obviously the way that this ends, it's going to be a different director for the next episode, and so obviously they have to pick right back up and reset and look at the old things. And next week when they come back to start shooting, or however it works. But I think, again, it's that love letter to comics. This is how this is how comics keep you reading. Right.
Yeah.
And I also think, because it's only 6 episodes, it's a little meta in the new world of comics, not when I was a kid reading comics, but now every arc is 6 issues.
Mm-hmm.
The end of 6 issues, we bind it, we print it, we send it out. That's how this Hawkeye series is done. The My Life is a Weapon series. So it's like 6 issues, here you go. 6 issues, here you go. So to me, it's again meta commentary. We're only going to do 6 episodes because it's just like a comic arc. Now, back in the day, a comic arc could take 2 years to come to a conclusion, or it didn't. It was just a continuous story, and they were a bunch of villains of the week. And I actually kind of like that a little bit better in some ways. But so I do think this is hey, comic readers, this is what you're used to. You get 6 issues over 6 months, You'll get 6 issues only in 6 weeks, and you get it. So it's that same storytelling device that it's something different for non-comic readers, but for comic readers, it scratches our itch. And I love that ending. I can't wait for next week. I think it's going to be, I can't decide if I'm just going to wait 3 weeks and just watch all three like I did for this one, or if I am going to go week to week. I've not done that with any of the Marvel shows. I don't go week to week because I just can't stand it. I'd rather just deprive myself and binge than go week to week. It's, so I haven't decided yet, but it does make it feel much more like a comic book this way.
Yeah, I think that the 6 episodes, it's funny because with this series, I especially feel confident in it now. And my first guest I had on for episode 1 was worried that, like, how are they going to tell the story in only 6 episodes? It seems too big. But knowing that it's only a few days, knowing that, that helps me to be confident, like, oh yeah, they can tell. It's 6 hours to tell, or probably 5 hours really to tell a story of 4 days. They can definitely do that.
100%.
And I feel like, and I don't feel as intimidated by that now. Like where I was thinking, like, man, how are they going to fit all this stuff and explain all this stuff? But now it's like, really, they don't have to explain everything. They don't have to give us Kingpin. They don't have to give us much of anything. They just got to show what happens to these people over the course of 4 days.
Yeah, and we're halfway there. We're 2 days in.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it very much. So cannot wait for next week.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I mean, I think I'll just say yes. I ramble, and I've already kept you so long. I agree with you. Completely.
You're gonna wait till, I think you're gonna wait 3 weeks. I don't think you're gonna go. It's unfortunately, I have to. Actually, I wouldn't say unfortunately. I love it. I love the anticipation. Week to week and discussing it all the way up until it happens. Like, I love it.
No, and that's the thing, that when I listen in real time, then I can listen to your show in real time. Then it's not like, oh, that's 8 hours of Brett's show to listen to, but that's also okay. I don't mind that. It's like I don't mind saving, like my friend Mike Burton. Sometimes I'll save his Star Wars shows. Like I always listen to Genuine Chit Chat when it first comes out, but sometimes I'll save 2 or 3 Star Wars shows because he's like walking you through it, and it's like such an adventure. So sometimes it's like, I want to just go hang out in Star Wars land, and I'll have 2 or 3 Mike shows. I'll download them the day they come out, and then I'll listen to 3 in a row, and I feel like I've gone on this epic adventure with him. So it just depends on the mood that I'm in. But now that I've started this, it might be because I didn't do this with the others. I waited on all the rest. But now that you asked me to be on 3,
I did it.
Yep. So I'll probably just watch along. I don't know how I can wait now.
Well, I hope so, because now I can get you to join the conversation, Twitter and stuff, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to.
You letting me do this, man. This is fun.
Dude, thank you for being here. This has been an awesome conversation, and I hope I'd really hope to get you back, hopefully for the roundtable discussion that we do at the end. So you're definitely at least gonna have to watch them by then. So
sure, that's like in a month from now. Like first week of January? Is that when you're gonna do it?
Yeah, it'll be like a week or 2 after the series ends.
Yeah, because it ends Christmas week, and you've got little East, so you're not doing anything. That's not happening.
Right.
So yeah, in January, first week of January, I probably could swing something. So we'll talk. Yeah, that'd be cool. Awesome. And definitely when Ms. Marvel's on, I'm going to be watching that. And I mean, I've been, as much as I love this series, and like I said, I think if it weren't for this run, the G. Willow Wilson, Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel was the best comic Marvel was putting out in that time. I mean, it is, when you sit down and start watching the show, and if you read it, it is exceptional. It is an exceptional storytelling. It is everything that you want about a young protagonist. It appeals to younger readers, older readers. One of my daughter who was reading it, one of her friends would come over and read it, and she'd like talk to her. She's like, "Yo, Kamala." It was amazing. It's such a great series. I'm so excited that when they announced Ms. Marvel, of all of the things that was announced last year, that was the one I was most excited for.
Well, as soon as they announce the date that it's dropping and everything, I'm putting you down.
Okay, I'll come on issue 1. I'm down.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, man. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, for sure. This was so fun. I appreciate you, and good to meet you in real life, not just on your Twitter face. It turns out your Twitter face and your actual face are the same face, everybody. He's not lying about who he is.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy, Tony. Thank you.
All right, man. Thanks.